I stand at my own front door, key in hand, watching through the frosted glass as my son Brandon gestures wildly at the head of my dining table, the table I bought 30 years ago, ordering me to give up my seat to his mother-in-law, a woman I've met exactly twice before tonight. "Give my mother-in-law your seat or get out." His voice carries through the oak door, sharp enough to cut glass. Behind him, my daughter-in-law Melissa smiles that particular smile I've learned to recognize over the past 18 months, the one that says she's won something. My granddaughter Sophie, barely 21, stares at her plate like it holds the secrets of the universe. 23 people have gone silent in my dining room, in my house, at my Christmas dinner, that I paid for, every single element of it. Before I tell you what I did next, I need you to do something for me. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done if your own child spoke to you that way in front of your entire family. And tell me where you're watching from, because I think this story is going to travel. And I want to know it's reaching people who understand what it feels like when the people you built everything for decide you're disposable. I'll wait. My name is Margaret Ellen Crawford. I'm 62 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, though I grew up in the mountains about 40 miles west of here in a town so small it doesn't appear on most maps. I'm telling you this not because I think my geography matters, but because context does. I spent 40 years building Crawford Property Management. From a single duplex, I renovated myself into a company that manages over 300 residential and commercial properties across western North Carolina. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because what happened to me that Christmas Eve could happen to anyone who's worked their whole life to build something, only to watch their family treat that work, and them, like it's worthless the moment they decide they want control of it instead of you. Before that night, my life was exactly what I'd designed it to be after my husband Daniel died 7 years ago. Quiet mornings with coffee on the wraparound porch of the Victorian I'd restored in the Montford Historic District. Afternoons reviewing property reports and meeting with my property managers. Evenings with my book club or pottery class, or simply reading in the library Daniel and I had built together, surrounded by the floor-to-ceiling shelves he'd constructed with his own hands before the cancer took him. I had my routines, my independence, my work, and my dignity. I had Sunday dinners with Brandon and his family when they were in town. Birthday celebrations, the occasional weekend trip to the mountains. It was enough. It was good. I thought we were close. Brandon is my only child. He's 39 now, works in pharmaceutical sales, makes decent money, but nothing like what the properties generate. He married Melissa 6 years ago, a perfectly pleasant woman from Connecticut with expensive tastes and a family that, from what I could gather, operated on the principle that appearance mattered more than substance. They have Sophie, Melissa's daughter from her first marriage, whom Brandon adopted. For the first few years, everything seemed normal. Then, about 18 months ago, things began to shift in ways so subtle I convinced myself I was imagining it. It started with Melissa mentioning, casually, that the Victorian was a lot of house for one person. "Just an observation," she said. Then Brandon started asking more questions about the business, not the interested questions he'd asked before, but pointed ones. Who had power of attorney if something happened to me? Had I updated my will recently? Didn't I think it was time to slow down, maybe let someone younger handle the day-to-day operations? He said it with concern, with love, but there was something underneath it I couldn't name yet. Keys went missing and reappeared. Melissa began showing up at my house when I wasn't expecting her, always with a reason. She was in the neighborhood, she wanted to drop off something, she thought I might need help with something. My property manager started getting calls from Brandon asking about specific properties, claiming I'd asked him to check on things. I hadn't. The comments became more frequent. At Sophie's college graduation dinner, Melissa mentioned how much easier it would be if I lived somewhere more manageable, maybe one of those nice senior communities with activities and people my own age. Brandon agreed immediately, saying he worried about me in that big old house all alone. When I said I loved my house and had no intention of leaving it, Melissa smiled and patted my hand like I was a child who didn't understand what was good for me. Of course you do, Margaret. We're just thinking ahead, planning, for when you need more help. I was 62, ran a successful business, drove myself everywhere, cooked my own meals, and hiked 3 miles every morning. I didn't need help. But I noticed after that dinner that they started talking about me in third person when I was in the room. She gets so stubborn about these things. She doesn't always remember to lock the doors. She's mentioned feeling confused lately. None of it was true. All of it was calculated. The shift accelerated last spring. Brandon suggested I add him to my bank accounts, just in case. For emergencies, he said, in case I got sick or couldn't access them. When I politely declined, explaining that I had proper legal protections in place through my attorney, his face hardened for just a moment before the smile returned. Melissa started bringing her mother, Patricia, to our family dinners without asking. A woman who barely spoke to me but assessed my house, my furniture, my belongings with the eyes of someone cataloging inventory. Papers appeared for me to sign, refinancing documents, updated insurance policies, authorizations for Brandon to speak to my property managers on my behalf. Each time, he had a reason that sounded logical until I actually read the fine print. Each time, I refused. Each time, the temperature in the room dropped a little more. By summer, they'd started planning my Christmas dinner without consulting me. Brandon called in October to tell me they'd invited 23 people. His colleagues, Melissa's family, people I barely knew, and that they'd handle everything so I wouldn't be stressed. I said I appreciated the gesture but preferred to plan my own holiday. He talked over me, said it was already organized, said Melissa had already sent invitations, said it would be rude to back out now. When I insisted on at least contributing, on making it a collaboration, Melissa said in that bright, brittle voice she used when she was done negotiating, "Margaret, honestly, just let us handle it. You can show up and enjoy yourself. You've earned that, haven't you?" The subtext was clear. Sit down, be grateful, and stay out of the way. Your time running things is over. But I didn't sit down. I paid for the entire dinner myself. The caterer, the wine, the elaborate dessert table Melissa wanted. The premium ham and grass-fed beef, the organic vegetables, the imported cheese board, the flowers, every single detail of the Christmas she was planning in my house. I did it quietly, without announcement, because I wanted to see exactly how far this would go. I wanted to see if my own son would stand in my home, at my table, and treat me like an inconvenience while enjoying the hospitality I was providing. I needed to know if my instincts were right or if grief and age were making me paranoid. I got my answer on Christmas Eve. The first real confirmation came 3 weeks before Christmas. I was at my office in downtown Asheville going through quarterly reports when my assistant, Ruth, a woman who'd worked with me for 15 years and knew my business almost as well as I did, knocked on my door with an expression I'd never seen before. She closed the door behind her, which she never did unless something was seriously wrong. "Margaret," she said quietly, "I got a very strange call this morning from your son." My stomach tightened. He wanted copies of your property portfolio, your financial statements, and the contact information for all your major clients. He said you'd asked him to start taking over because you were struggling with memory issues and decision-making. He said you'd authorized him to begin transitioning the business to his oversight. I felt my hands go cold. "I've authorized nothing of the sort." Ruth nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here. I told him I'd need written authorization from you directly and that I'd need to speak with you first. He got angry, said I was being difficult, that I was making things harder for you, that he was trying to help you. Then he said something that really bothered me. He said, "She's not capable of making these decisions anymore, and if you can't see that, maybe you're not the right person to be working here either." That's when I knew. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was a calculated move to take control of my business and my assets while I was still alive, using the fiction that I was incompetent to justify it. I asked Ruth to document the call, to keep a record of any further contact from Brandon or anyone in his household, and to notify me immediately if anyone tried to access my accounts or files. Then I called my attorney, Michael Brennan, a man I'd worked with for 20 years and trusted completely. Michael listened without interrupting as I explained the pattern of behavior over the past 18 months. The suggestions about moving, the attempts to access my finances, the third-person conversations, the unauthorized calls to my staff. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Margaret, I need you to hear this clearly. What you're describing is the early stage of what's called undue influence or financial exploitation of an elder. It usually escalates. Based on what you've told me, I believe your son and his wife are positioning themselves to take control of your assets, possibly through a guardianship or conservatorship claim, by building a false narrative that you're incapacitated. The unauthorized contact with your employees, the third-party witnesses they're bringing to family events, the documentation they're trying to get you to sign, it's all consistent with that pattern." The words hit like a physical blow. My own son, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone after Daniel died. The man I'd supported through college, through his wedding, through every major milestone of his life. Michael continued, "I'm going to recommend we take some protective measures immediately. Update your healthcare directives to explicitly name someone other than Brandon as your healthcare proxy. Create a revocable trust for your assets with an independent trustee. Document your mental and physical competency with your physician. And I want you to start keeping a detailed record of every interaction, every request, every unusual incident. If this goes where I think it might, you're going to need evidence that you were fully capable and that this was a coordinated attempt to exploit you." I did everything he suggested. I saw my physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been my doctor for 12 years. I explained the situation and asked for a comprehensive cognitive assessment. She ran every test available: memory, reasoning, executive function, mental status exam. The results were clear. I was cognitively intact, fully capable, and showed no signs of dementia or impairment. She documented everything and gave me copies for my records. I updated all my legal documents, naming Ruth as my healthcare proxy and Michael as trustee of a newly established trust that protected my assets from unauthorized access. I started keeping notes on my phone, time-stamped and detailed, of every interaction with Brandon and Melissa, and I waited to see what would happen next. What happened next was the Christmas dinner. They arrived on December 23rd to set up, bringing Melissa's mother Patricia, her sister Julia, and Brandon's colleague David and his wife. They moved through my house like they owned it, rearranging furniture, directing the caterers I'd hired, making decisions about my space without asking. Melissa told me, not asked, that I'd be sitting in the middle of the table, not at the head where I always sat. "It'll be easier for you to visit with everyone," she said sweetly. Patricia examined my china cabinet and asked if I'd considered downsizing my collection. "You have so much stuff, Margaret. It must be overwhelming to maintain." Brandon told me what time to come downstairs on Christmas Eve, 5 o'clock. Not earlier, because they needed time to finalize things first. I smiled and nodded and documented every word. Christmas Eve morning, I went to my office. I had one more piece of evidence I needed to secure. I'd installed security cameras throughout my house 2 months earlier, discreet ones that Ruth's husband, who did private security work, had helped me set up. They recorded audio and video, stored everything in the cloud, and were completely invisible unless you knew where to look. I told no one except Ruth and Michael. Now I logged into the system from my office and reviewed the footage from the previous evening after I'd gone to bed. What I saw made my blood run cold and my resolve turn to steel. Brandon and Melissa, sitting in my living room at midnight, going through papers spread across my coffee table. My papers. Financial statements they must have taken from my desk. "Once we get her to sign the power of attorney tomorrow, we can move forward with the sale of the properties," Brandon said clearly into the camera I'd hidden in the bookshelf. We'll tell her it's for estate planning, that it protects her. She'll believe it because she wants to believe we're helping." Melissa laughed, actually laughed, and said, "By New Year's, we'll have everything transferred. She can move into that assisted living place in Hendersonville, and we'll have the house on the market by March. Patricia's already talked to a realtor." Brandon nodded. "She'll fight it at first, but once we have legal control, there's nothing she can do." My lawyer said, "As long as we have documentation of her decline, and we've been building that for months, we can make it stick." I sat in my office and watched this footage 3 times, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might actually have the medical crisis they were pretending I'd already had. My son, discussing selling my life's work out from under me, planning to put me in a facility against my will, forging a narrative of my incompetence to steal everything I'd built. I called Michael, told him to watch the footage I was sending him, waited while he did. When he came back on the line, his voice was tight with anger. "Margaret, this is conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. This is criminal. We need to contact the police and the district attorney's office immediately." "Not yet," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Let them think they've won. Let them have their Christmas dinner. Let them bring all their witnesses and stage whatever performance they've planned. I want every person in that room to see exactly who they are. And then I want to take it all away from them in a way they'll never forget." Michael was silent for a moment. Then, "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking they're planning to present me with papers to sign tomorrow at dinner, in front of all those people, to pressure me into signing by making it look like a loving family helping their confused mother make good decisions. I'm thinking I'm going to walk into that performance exactly as they expect, and then I'm going to give them the exit they've been asking for, but on my terms, with my witnesses, and my evidence. Can you be available tomorrow night? Say, around 8. "I'll be available whenever you need me." "Good. I'll call you when it's time. And Michael, bring the police. I want this documented properly." I went home that afternoon and did something I hadn't done in months. I dressed for battle. Not literally, I wore a simple burgundy dress and my pearl necklace, the one Daniel had given me on our 20th anniversary. But I felt like I was putting on armor. I was walking into an ambush with full knowledge of what was coming, and I was going to control every minute of what happened next. At 4:30, I received a text from Brandon. "We're all here. Come down whenever you're ready. No rush." Translation: "Everyone's assembled for the show. Your entrance is all that's missing." I came downstairs at 5 exactly. My dining room was full of people I barely knew, all seated except for one chair in the middle of the table. Not at the head where I'd sat for 40 years, but in the middle, sandwiched between Patricia and one of Brandon's colleagues. The head of the table was occupied by Melissa, my seat, at my table, in my house. I stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Brandon saw me first. He smiled too widely. "Mom, Merry Christmas. Come in, we're just about to start." I walked to the chair they designated for me, and that's when Patricia, Melissa's mother, said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, is that where Margaret's sitting? I thought that was my seat. Melissa dear, didn't you tell me I'd sit there?" Melissa looked at me with those cold blue eyes and said, "Actually, Mom, I thought you might be more comfortable at the head of the table. You know, since you're our guest of honor." She stood up from my chair, the one at the head of the table, and gestured to it like she was granting a favor. "Margaret won't mind sitting here in the middle. Will you, Margaret? You always say you just love being surrounded by family." Every eye in that room turned to me. This was the setup. This was the moment designed to make me look difficult if I objected, confused if I agreed, and subordinate either way. This was the moment when I was supposed to understand my place in the new hierarchy they'd constructed. But I didn't object. I didn't argue. I smiled graciously and said, "Of course, whatever makes Patricia comfortable." I sat in the middle chair. Patricia moved to the head of the table, to my seat, and settled in like a queen on a throne. Melissa sat to her mother's right. Brandon sat to her left. I was in the middle of the table, bracketed by strangers, separated from the positions of authority in my own home. The symbolism was deliberate, the message was clear, and everyone there understood it, even if they didn't know they were watching a power play. Dinner began. The food I'd paid for was served on the china I'd collected over 40 years. The wine I'd selected was poured into the crystal glasses Daniel and I had received as wedding gifts. Conversation flowed around me. Shop talk from Brandon's colleagues, Patricia telling long stories about her garden club in Connecticut, Melissa describing the renovation plans for a lake house they were considering buying. No one asked me questions. No one included me in the conversation. When I tried to speak, I was talked over or ignored. Sophie, my granddaughter, met my eyes once across the table with an expression that might have been apology or shame, but she said nothing. I was a piece of furniture, a relic, an obligation to be managed. Halfway through the main course, Brandon stood and tapped his wine glass. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment. I know Christmas Eve dinner is a time for celebration, but Melissa and I wanted to take this opportunity, with all of you here as witnesses, to address something important. As many of you know, my mother has been struggling lately. Struggling, that word. We've noticed increasing confusion, difficulty managing her affairs, some concerning lapses in judgment. We love her deeply, and we want to make sure she's protected and cared for as she enters this new phase of her life." I sat very still, my hands folded in my lap, my face neutral. This was it, the performance, the false narrative delivered in front of 23 witnesses who would later testify that yes, her son seemed concerned, yes, he mentioned her decline, yes, it all seemed very loving and appropriate. Brandon continued, "So tonight, with all of you here to witness this act of love and family unity, we've prepared some documents that will help ensure Mom is taken care of properly. Power of attorney, healthcare directives, some estate planning paperwork that will make things easier for everyone." He pulled out a folder, my folder, from my desk. The one I'd noticed was missing 2 days ago, and set it on the table in front of me. "Mom, if you could just sign these tonight, we can all relax knowing you're protected. Our attorney has reviewed everything. It's all very standard. We just need your signature." The room had gone completely silent. 23 pairs of eyes watched me. This was the moment of truth they'd engineered. Sign and prove I was compliant, confused, easily manipulated. Refuse and prove I was difficult, paranoid, possibly incompetent. I looked at the folder, looked at my son, looked at Melissa's satisfied smile, looked at Patricia sitting in my chair at the head of my table, wearing an expression of smug approval. And then I looked at the stranger sitting to my right, one of Brandon's pharmaceutical colleagues, who was nodding along like this was all perfectly reasonable. That's when Brandon said it, the thing I knew was coming, but still hit like a slap. "And Mom, I think it would be appropriate, given that we're making these important family decisions tonight, if you gave your seat to Patricia. She's our guest of honor, after all, and you're sitting in the middle anyway. It just makes sense. So why don't you give my mother-in-law your seat, or just get out if you're going to make this difficult?" The room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. Several people gasped. Sophie's fork clattered onto her plate, but Melissa's smile widened. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The moment when I'd be humiliated into compliance or shocked into leaving, either outcome giving them what they needed. Patricia actually started to rise from her seat at the head of the table, ready to take my middle chair in a bizarre game of musical chairs designed to demonstrate who had power and who didn't. I looked at Brandon, my son, my only child, the boy I'd loved and raised and sacrificed everything to give a good life. And I saw a stranger, a man I didn't recognize, a man who just ordered his mother to give up her seat or get out of her own home on Christmas Eve in front of 24 witnesses. I felt something inside me go very quiet and very cold. The hurt was there, enormous and crushing, but underneath it was clarity, pure, crystalline clarity. I stood up, slowly, calmly. I set my napkin on the table. I looked around the room at all these people in my house, eating my food, drinking my wine, sitting in my chairs. And I said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, "All right." That's all. Just all right. Brandon looked confused for a moment, like he'd expected more resistance. Melissa's smile flickered uncertainly. Patricia sat back down, clearly unsure what was happening. I picked up my purse from the sideboard, walked to the front hall, took my coat from the closet, and opened my own front door. Behind me, I heard confused murmuring, someone asking if I was really leaving, Melissa saying something about how I was being dramatic as usual. I didn't turn around. I walked out my front door, pulled it closed behind me, got into my car, and drove away from my own house on Christmas Eve. I drove straight to the Hampton Inn on Tunnel Road, checked into a room, and called Michael. "It's done," I said. "They just performed exactly as predicted in front of 23 witnesses. I have it all on video. And now they think I've accepted defeat and walked away. How long do you think before they realize what they've done? Knowing people like this? Not until it's too late to stop it. Are you ready for phase 2? More than ready. Give me until 9 o'clock. That should be enough time for them to really enjoy their victory. Then bring everything." I sat in that hotel room for the next 3 hours, watching the security camera footage from my house on my laptop. I watched them celebrate after I left, watched Melissa crack open another bottle of my wine and toast new beginnings. Watched Brandon tell everyone not to worry, that I'd come around once I'd had time to think about what's best. Watched them serve dessert and coffee, watched them laugh and relax. Watched Patricia hold court at the head of my table like she'd conquered something. Watched my son box up the documents I hadn't signed and tell his colleague he'd get her to sign them tomorrow when she's calmed down. Watched them plan my dismantling like it was already accomplished. At 8:45, I called Michael. "They're still there. All of them. Come now." At 8:57, my doorbell rang. I watched on camera as Brandon answered it, confused. I watched his face change as he saw Michael, my attorney, and Detective Sarah Kim from the Asheville Police Department's Elder Abuse Unit, and Ruth, my assistant, carrying a laptop, and Dr. Chen, my physician. Brandon stammered, "What? What is this? What's going on?" Michael's voice was professional and cold. "Mr. Crawford, I'm Michael Brennan, attorney for Margaret Crawford. This is Detective Kim. We're here regarding multiple potential violations, including attempted fraud, undue influence, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. We have evidence that you and your wife have engaged in a pattern of behavior designed to take control of your mother's assets through coercion and false representations about her mental capacity. We need everyone to remain here while we discuss this matter." I watched Brandon's face go white, watched Melissa stand up so fast her chair fell over, watched the room erupt into confused questions, watched Patricia demand to know what was going on. And then I watched Michael set Ruth's laptop on the dining room table, turn it around, and play the footage from the night before. My son and daughter-in-law in my living room, discussing how they were going to forge my incompetence and steal my life's work. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear people breathing. Then Detective Kim spoke. "Mr. Crawford, Mrs. Crawford, you're both under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud and financial exploitation of an elder. While we conduct this investigation, we'll be implementing several immediate protective measures. First, you're both prohibited from any contact with Mrs. Margaret Crawford, except through her attorney. Second, any and all access you had to her financial accounts, properties, or business operations is immediately revoked. Third, any documents you attempted to have her sign tonight are null and void, and attempting to execute them will result in criminal charges. Fourth, you have exactly 1 hour to remove yourselves and your belongings from this residence. This is Mrs. Crawford's property, and she's made it clear you're no longer welcome here." Brandon found his voice. It came out strangled. "Where is she? Where's my mother?" Mrs. Crawford is safe and in full control of her faculties, her business, and her assets. Which brings me to my next point. Detective Kim gestured to Ruth, who pulled out a stack of papers. We've documented everything. The unauthorized calls to her employees, the attempts to access her financial records, the false claims about her mental state, the coordination with outside parties to facilitate transfer of her assets, and now, tonight's attempt to coerce her into signing over power of attorney using social pressure and humiliation. Your performance tonight, in front of 23 witnesses, has actually helped us establish the pattern of abuse quite clearly. Melissa's voice was shrill. This is insane! We were trying to help her. She's confused. She's not capable of managing everything anymore. We were trying to protect her. Dr. Chen stepped forward. Oh, the look on their faces when they recognize my physician. Mrs. Crawford is my patient. I've conducted comprehensive cognitive and psychological assessments of her within the past month. She is fully competent, shows no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment, and is perfectly capable of managing her affairs. In fact, she's been managing them brilliantly, including documenting your systematic attempt to undermine her autonomy and steal her assets. Any claims you've made about her incompetence are not only false, but potentially defamatory. One of Brandon's colleagues stood up. I think we should leave. This is a family matter. Several other guests scrambled for the door, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. Within minutes, the dining room had cleared except for Brandon, Melissa, Patricia, Sophie, Michael, Detective Kim, Ruth, and Dr. Chen. Sophie was crying quietly. Patricia looked like she'd been struck. Melissa was shaking with rage. Brandon just looked hollow. You set us up, he said finally. You planned all of this. Michael answered for me. Mrs. Crawford protected herself from a coordinated attempt to exploit her. She documented your behavior, secured her assets, established her competency, and gave you every opportunity to stop. You chose not to. You chose instead to attempt to humiliate her in her own home on Christmas Eve, in front of witnesses, while trying to force her to sign documents that would have given you control of everything she's built over 40 years. Yes, she planned. She planned to protect herself from her own son. I'd say that's pretty tragic, wouldn't you? Detective Kim handed Brandon a business card. You'll be hearing from us about formal charges. In the meantime, remove yourself from this property, now. I watched them gather their things, watched Melissa sob and rage, claiming they'd been trying to help, that this was ungrateful and cruel. Watched Patricia march out with her head high, refusing to acknowledge what had just happened. Watched Sophie approach the camera. She must have figured out where one was, and whisper, I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't know it would go this far. I should have said something. Watched her leave with tears streaming down her face, and watched my son, last to leave, stand in the doorway of the house he'd tried to steal from me and say to no one in particular, she's my mother. How could she do this to me? The answer, of course, was that I didn't do anything to him. I protected myself from what he was doing to me, but narcissists never understand that distinction. At 9:30, Michael called me. They're gone. The house is clear. You can come home now if you want, or you can stay at the hotel, whatever you need. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove back to my house, and walked in to find Michael, Ruth, Dr. Chen, and Detective Kim cleaning up the remains of Christmas dinner. My table was still set with the china I'd collected over 4 decades. The food I'd paid for was half-eaten and cold. But my home was mine again. I stood in the doorway and felt the weight of what had just happened settle over me. My only child had tried to steal my life. I'd stopped him. I'd protected myself. And I'd done it in a way that would ensure he could never do this to me or anyone else again. But the cost was everything we'd ever had as mother and son. Dr. Chen hugged me. Ruth made tea. Michael went over the legal next steps. Detective Kim explained the investigation process. They stayed until almost midnight. These people who'd stood by me when my own family betrayed me. After they left, I sat alone in my library surrounded by the books Daniel and I had collected together, and I let myself cry. Not for what I'd lost, because you can't lose something that was never really there, but for what I'd believed we had, for the illusion of family I'd held on to until the moment my son told me to get out of my own home. The investigation took 3 months. The district attorney ultimately offered Brandon and Melissa a deal: restitution for the resources they'd consumed during their attempted exploitation, permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with me, mandatory financial counseling, community service, and 5 years probation. The alternative was felony charges and potential prison time. They took the deal. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. Michael represented my interests, and that was enough. The restitution was substantial. They had to repay not just the cost of the Christmas dinner, but the documented expenses they'd incurred using my resources over the 18 months of their scheme, property taxes they'd promised to pay but hadn't, maintenance costs they'd claimed to handle but billed to me, even the caterers they'd hired for the Christmas dinner, claiming it was their gift when I'd paid for every penny of it. The total came to over $40,000. They sold the lake house they'd been planning to buy with my money. I didn't take any satisfaction in that. I just wanted accounting. I wanted truth. Sophie reached out 6 months later, through Michael. She wanted to see me. She wanted to apologize. She claimed she hadn't understood what her mother and Brandon were doing until it was too late. I agreed to meet her once, in Michael's office with him present. She cried through most of the conversation, told me she'd moved out, that she'd cut contact with her mother and Brandon, that she was ashamed of her silence. I listened, and then I told her something I hope she never forgets. Sophie, you're 21 years old. You're an adult. You watched your stepfather try to steal from his own mother, and you said nothing because it was easier to look at your plate than to stand up. That's a choice you made. I hope you learn from it. I hope the next time you see someone being exploited or humiliated, you find your voice. But I can't have you in my life. I can't risk it. I hope you understand. She nodded through her tears and left. I haven't heard from her since. I hope she's well. I hope she's learned. But I can't carry the weight of her redemption. I have my own life to live. Crawford Property Management is thriving. I promoted Ruth to Chief Operating Officer. We've expanded into Tennessee and Georgia. I still take my morning hikes. I still have my book club and my pottery classes. I've started traveling more, something Daniel and I always meant to do, but ran out of time for. I went to Scotland last fall. I'm planning a trip to New Zealand next spring. My life is full and purposeful and entirely my own. I don't date. I don't need to. I have friends, work I love, and the peace that comes from knowing I stood up for myself when it mattered most. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did, if I wish I'd tried to reconcile with Brandon, given him another chance, found some way to rebuild the relationship. The answer is no. What he and Melissa did wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, systematic, months-long campaign to exploit my love and trust, to manufacture a narrative of my incompetence, and to steal everything I'd built. They didn't stop until they were caught. They didn't feel remorse until they faced consequences. And even then, the remorse was for being caught, not for what they'd done. You don't reconcile with that. You protect yourself from it, and you move forward. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, if your family is pressuring you to sign things you don't understand, if they're making decisions about your life without your input, if they're talking about you like you're not there or claiming you're confused when you're not, please listen to me. Document everything. Get your own attorney, not a family attorney. See your doctor and get your competency established in writing. Protect your assets through trusts and legal structures they can't access. Don't assume love will stop them. Don't assume family means safety. Sometimes the people who pose the greatest threat to your autonomy and dignity are the ones who call you mom or dad. And if you wait until they've already taken control, it becomes exponentially harder to get it back. I'm 63 now. I stood at my front door a year ago watching through frosted glass as my son ordered me to give up my seat or get out. I walked out that door with nothing but my dignity and my plan. I walked back in with my freedom and my future intact. My son lost everything he tried to steal and more. And I'm still here, still strong, still in control of my own life. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's protection. That's what happens when you try to take from someone who spent a lifetime learning to fight smart instead of loud. The house is quiet now on Christmas Eve. I light a fire in the fireplace Daniel built. I make myself the dinner I want to eat. I drink the wine I choose. I sit in my chair at the head of my table. And I'm grateful, not for what happened, but for the strength I found to face it. For the people like Michael and Ruth and Dr. Chen who stood with me. For the life I still have to live on my own terms. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and whether you've ever had to protect yourself from family. And if this story helped you in any way, if it gave you courage or clarity, or just the knowledge that you're not alone in this, then please share it. Someone else out there needs to hear it. Someone else is sitting at a table in their own home being told they don't matter anymore. Let them know they do. Let them know they can fight back. And let them know that sometimes the quietest exit is the one that changes everything. Merry Christmas. Protect yourself. Protect your peace. And never, ever let anyone, family or otherwise, tell you you're too old, too confused, or too insignificant to stand up for your own dignity.